Hi, everyone. It is the start of the second session of the Social Innovation and Global Ethics Forum today, dedicated to disruptive technologies and how this can impact the world positively. It is my grand privilege to introduce you someone that I consider as my Haniki, someone of inspiration, a magician of art and philosophy, someone that is dedicating his life to inspire through art, Mr. Akira Hasegawa. Dear Akira Hasegawa-san, the floor is yours, and I will be translating what you will be sharing with our audience.
はい、皆さん、こんばんは。昨年に引き続き、今年もスピーチをさせていただきます、デジタルアーティストの長谷川明です。これ後ろに今、デジタルケチがかかってますけれども、私は過去の芸術には全くなかった移ろい、日本語で移ろいという芸術の新しいカテゴリーを開きました。それはデジタル掛け軸と申します。これですね。今日、大きなブームになっています、プロジェクションマッピングの、元祖であります。世界遺産はじめ、ノーベル賞のナイトカップ晩餐会や、世界各地450カ所にインストールをしてきました。昨年はデータ化された社会に生かされている人類とは、それは全て過去社会に生きているんだということをスピーチしましたが、今年はそこからもう一歩踏み込んで、過去社会に生きるということはどういうことなのかということについてお話ししたいと思います。
Akira-san. So, hello everyone. My name is Akira Hasegawa. I'm a digital artist. I will be sharing a speech this year like I did last year. I am sharing as well about my art, and this is on the background mapping project that I created. I am a pioneer of projection mapping, which is becoming very popular today. I have been installing digital hanging scroll at various prestigious places, such as World Heritage Sites and dinner gala for the Nobel Prize. I've installed it in around 450 places. I make a new category of art, which is called Utsuroi. In Japanese, it means change and vicissitude. This never existed in past artistic expression.
今日の人間社会は情報社会と言われて、何年か過ぎてまいりました。情報化ということは、数値化のことでもありますね。そこで、そこに自然とルールが生まれるということでしょう。ルールがあり、条件があり、勝敗が決まる。私たちはそれをゲームと、呼んでいるわけですね。つまり、情報化とは人間社会がゲーム化されたことを意味しているのです。ルールがあって、勝敗が決するのはゲーム。今年開催が予定されているオリンピックも、正式名はオリンピアード競技大会、ゲームオブザオリンピアード、まさしくゲームです。
Last year, I discussed how human beings are living in a data-based society. In what it means everything lives in the past society. Today, I will explain this further. What is everything lives in the past society?
野球をはじめ、ゴルフもサッカーもスポーツはすべてゲームですが、それだけじゃなく、株式の相場、為替、宝くじ、お金が絡む経済活動もルールがあり、勝敗が決するという意味では、まさにゲームなんですね。もっと言えば、政治や宗教、教育といった分野も、ある側面から見れば立派なゲームだと言えるでしょう。ゲームは本来、安全なものであるはずなんですね。なぜなら、プレイヤーはゲームの外にいるからなんです。ですが、ゲームがハードになりすぎて、プレイヤーが自身がですね、安全に脅かされる事態になると、 たちまちのうちに社会は混乱し、今日のコロナ危機はまさにその表れですね。
What we can see by this pandemic, the world is gamified. Today's human society has been called an information society. Information society means digital society. Digitalization makes easier to compare things. We can see win and loss easier. And when the environment and situation are quantified, rules will come up naturally.
では、なぜ、人はゲームが好きなのか。なぜ人間はそのゲームに巻き込まれてしまうんでしょうか。今まで何度もゲームに巻き込まれ、散々な思いをしたにもかかわらず、なぜ懲りずに、ゲームを好むのでしょうか。それはゲームにスリルがあるからです。
There are rules, conditions, win and loss. We call it a game. In other words, digital society means human society has been turned into a game. Rules determine games win and loss. Olympic game is scheduled to be held this year in Japan. And the official name of the Olympic Games is the Game of the Olympiad, which is exactly the game. Baseball, golf, soccer, sports, all are games. Economic activities related to money, such as stock prices, exchange rates, and lottery tickets, etc., all have rules, and it is also a game. Politics, religion, and education are also great games in a way.
究極のスリルとは、死の恐怖なんですね。私たちは死ぬかもしれない、ゲームに喜びを感じます。例えば、スカイダイビングやバンジージャンプ、登山、冒険家のスポーツプレイヤーなどの特殊な人たちのプレイヤーなどのその行為は特殊な人たちのことだと思われるかもしれませんが、実は私たち日常でも様々な形で、小さな死を経験しようとしています。わざわざ怖い思いしてホラー映画を見たり、お化け屋敷に行くのはなぜでしょうか。行列までしてジェットコースターや絶叫マシンに乗るのはなぜでしょうか。これは全ては安全圏から死を体験するためです。
If safety is threatened, it becomes a crisis. Wars of aggression and ethnic conflicts, those are all incorporated into society as the same situation of a game. The game is basically safe. However, when the game becomes too hard and the player's own safety is threatened, the society gets confused and the crisis, such as the current COVID-19 pandemic, appears.
では、死を体験することがなぜそんなに魅力的なのでしょうか。それは私たちは死の恐怖から解放されたときに、大きな喜びを得るからです。つまり私たちは常に生きていることを実感したいんですね。
Why do people like games? Why do humans get involved in games? Why do people like games even though having had a lot of difficulties? Because game is thrilling.
ゲームのプレイヤーから離れて没頭しすぎると、恐怖が高まると。では、今回のようなコロナ危機はどうやって起こったのでしょうか。それはゲームに没頭しすぎたからだと思います。毎日のようにコロナの情報を集め、ニュースを片っ端から見て、信憑性のない噂を信じ、漫才師やコメンテーターの暴言を聞きすぎたから。ゲームに例えると、安全な今で楽しんでいたゲームプレイだったはずなのに、それを止めてゲームの中の主人公になってしまったというところでしょうか。そうです。ゲームの中に入ってしまったのです。
Please, yes. So as I say, why do people like games? Why do humans get involved in games? Why do people like games, even though having had a lot of difficulties? Because game is passionating, it's thrilling.
こうなると見るもの、聞くものすべては怖くなってしまって、ゲームの中の情報に支配をされてしまって、現実を見ることができなくなってしまいます。一人一人が心の中で作り出した虚構の、恐怖ですね。心の病を吹き飛ぶには、我々のようなアーティストがそれを吹き飛ばなくてはなりません。心の中の恐怖は自分自身で作り出したものでありますから、それは現実の恐怖ではないのです。こういう時こそ、AI、先端技術、こういう技術が人々のために活躍する、機器となることを信じたいものです。現在からは未来は開けますが、過去には絶対戻らない。ありがとうございました。
What is the ultimate thrill? The ultimate thrill is the fear of death. We feel delighted with the games that we could die. For example, skydiving, bungee jumping, climbing a harsh winter mountain alone, and challenging how far you can dive. You might think it's only a special person, such as the adventurer or a professional sports player. But actually, we are all trying to experience small deaths in many ways in our daily lives too. Watching horror movies or going to a haunted house, getting on a roller coaster, everything is to experience death from the safe zone, to feel the thrill. So why is it so fascinating for us to experience death? Because we get a great thrill when we are freed from the fear of death. We always want to feel that we are alive. Fear increases if you stay away from the game player and immerse yourself too much. So why did the corona crisis like this happen? Because people were too immersed in the game. People collected information about coronavirus every day, watched many news, believed in unreliable rumors, and overheard the delusions of many commentators who are not doctors nor specialists. It's like people were just players who enjoyed the game in a safe living room, but stopped it and became the main character in the game. We got into the game. Once it becomes like this, everything you see and hear becomes scary because you are controlled by the information in the game and cannot see the reality. If you think this way, you will find that it was not the actual event that made this corona crisis bigger. Fear is transmitted from person to person and spreads so fast. So it is the fictional horror that each of one of us created in our hearts that made the corona wreak so big. To get rid of this mental illness, art is effective in dispelling such a closed status and fear out of the heart. Art can show its true power in a critical situation like this. In other words, it is not art that cannot overcome this situation. Raise your face, open your eyes, feel your breathing, and let's be here. The horror in the mind is something you created by yourself. It's not the real horror. At such times, I would like Mr. Akira Segawa to believe that more and more cutting-edge technologies, such as AI, will come up and those will play a positive role for our life. We can create a future, but we cannot go back in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Akira Segawa, my Aniki.
Brother.
Gambate, gambate. Thank you very much, Akira-san. Thank you very much. So we are thanking Mr. Akira Segawa, and it is our great pleasure to continue with the other speakers. Mr. Akira Segawa, I'm looking forward seeing you again in Japan, and hopefully for Japan Olympics.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So we are very pleased now to welcome our second keynote speaker in the person of Carlos Moreira. Carlos, it's a great pleasure to welcome you. I like to see the wood on your back, because it remembers, when we met in Davos, which is, like about as well a balance between life, trees, snow, mountains, and as well, like how humans can make, a positive impact in the world. So Carlos Moreira is, first of all, someone that dedicated a big part of his life in serving as diplomat at the United Nations, and bringing, like technology and knowledge in many ways to support security and technology used by the United Nations and other agencies. Now, Carlos is the chairman of the WISeKey company. WISeKey is a group which is leading in terms of innovation in many ways, combining security as well as technologies like AI, blockchain, and holographic projections. It's a pleasure to welcome you, Carlos, because you have those two engines, the engines of creativity, but as well the willingness to help making the world better. So, Carlos, our first question will be, first of all, where did your inspiration come from? How can we become like you?
Thank you, Jonathan. I think you are yourself doing an amazing job as well to make the world a much better place for all of us and future generations. So this is a meeting of minds, people that they really truly want to make a change. And I think due to the fact that technologies are converging and we are going into a new digital renaissance, this is the real time to do so. I mean, we need to inspire new generations that now they have the tools which we didn't have when we were their age, to make a change and make a difference. So, as you said, I was lucky to be in Geneva when the web was developed by the CERN. Actually, I was sitting on the UN computing centers, and we were all just fascinated about that potential that the web will decentralize the power of information from silos, which was before the web, to decentralization, websites, free access. It was an amazing moment in the history of humankind, because then we realized that billions of people could access information in an uncompromisable way, and in a way that they could use that information to even generate more knowledge and contribute and exchange the knowledge between themselves. So that was 32 years ago. That happened in Geneva, and that was inspirational. But at the same time, technology is like fire. It can warm your house, but it can burn your house as well, right? Depends how you use it. At the same time, we started to realize that this infrastructure, if that gets what it is now, a $20 trillion economy, it will be subject to all sorts of abuses. And the number first abuse, the one that obviously is the one has become the business model, is the human, the person, ourselves. We have a huge value in the internet. Or consent, which is the consent that normally we do on every day, like letting your friends come into home for a dinner. You provide a consent for coming to have a dinner in your house, but that consent is within a time frame and conditional. And once you invite them to dinner, that's it. That cannot come every night to dinner, right? You only invite them once. We don't have that consent on the internet. When people start to use our data, or people start to data mine us with artificial intelligence, when people start to treat us as a product, then we do not have the capability to withdraw that consent. We are giving consent by default. And that was the big problem of the generation of the internet. Human has become a product. And as a consequence, we are suffering the, what we talk about sustainable development goals is an amazing endeavor, but before we are able to deploy them, we have to unleash that, I will call it, control platform has on human. And that's what WISeKey does. Our vision was, you have a birth certificate. When you burn, you burn in a city, you get a birth certificate. This is not conditional to nationality or to bank accounts or anything. It's you as a human. You get your birth certificate. We need a birth certificate to enter the internet. The first day that we become digital means or persona or digital self. That day you need to have a digital certificate which is associated to you. And that was the beginning of the WISeKey. I mean, I tried to do it in the UN, to be honest with you, but the UN is it's a governmental organization with a very slow process. So I said, okay, let's build a company around that. And I created WISeKey. WISeKey means World Internet Secure Key. I also created a foundation with the name International Organization for Secure Electronic Transactions, which is United Nations, ECOSOC, NGOs, and we are working as you know, and we met you in Davos with the World Economic Forum. Actually, this week is the Davos Dialogue for the Great Reset, so we are discussing those subjects in live. Also with this week as well. I mean, this is an important week where your event is happening, because we also have the Future Investment Initiative, the FII in Saudi Arabia, which is equivalent to Davos, and also creating a huge amount of awareness about putting human at the center of gravity. And this is essential. If we are able to return to the human, that power the human should have on itself, then we can connect to the fourth industrial revolution. Fourth industrial revolution is happening now. Things are getting connected to the internet. We have 1 trillion objects to be connected to the internet. We need to put microprocessors in those objects. WISeKey does that as well. We need to establish quality data to avoid fake data. So data should come in from authenticated devices all the way to cloud. So then artificial intelligence can analyze that data and take predictability analysis and being able to provide a much sharp study on the data they are analyzing, behavior of cars, sustainability on crops, agricultural research, education, health. All that is data. We are entering into a data society. Data is where you can very easily, if you're able to analyze data, you can take the real decision as a management, politician, doctor, or whatever you are. And data is available now. I mean, we are creating petabytes of data per second now. And that data before, we didn't know what to do with. It was equivalent when we didn't know how to use oil, we didn't know, and then we created an energy. Or when we didn't know how to use solar energy, now we are able to exploit solar energy. So we are entering into the society where we are learning how to use data. And that's going to change totally the way we are going to think, we're going to take decisions, and the way we're going to be able to solve problems. There is a very serious belief that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, if we just add AI on it, we will accelerate drastically and radically the execution of those Sustainable Development Goals, which many of them, by the way, during the COVID situation, has been challenged, has been reduced as an impact, has been slowed, because the COVID obviously is taking all the attention of the world. The data that we are also, COVID obviously is a terrible situation. We are working with many governments because WISeKey is helping them to serialize the apps that takes data from your COVID analysis. Also the apps that let you go into airplanes as a way to prove that you have you had a COVID test or you have a vaccination test. So we are working with many international organizations, such as IATA, WHO, and others, to trying to figure out how we can create a society that will use that data in a wise way and without being detrimental to the person. I mean, people say that in 20 years' time, when you look back into 2019, 2020, you will forget about COVID, but you will say it was in 2019 the surveillance society started. We are in a very risky moment now, because and it was actually Akira mentioned in your previous speech. We are part of this global experiment. It's the first ever socio-economic experiment where we're going to be not only injecting ourselves a liquid, then all 6 billion people will be injecting themselves. Imagine the psychological barriers that we are breaking, not only by just using a smart car or a mobile phone. Now we are willing to let somebody injecting something in our body because that thing is essential for our survival. So this socio-economical experiment, which is involving the entire world, needs to be done properly, and we need to put the right safeguard. AI, as I say, can reduce the time of execution of sustainable development goals, but AI is also biased. AI can be dangerous as well if you don't know how to do it properly. We are integrating AI in our capabilities. AI can take decisions by themselves. AI could very soon, once we reach singularity, which is the moment on where computers will be more intelligent than we are, could basically take decision or against us humans, right? So as we were able to do in other sectors, like in atomic energy, atomic bombs, we managed as a human to master technology in a way that technology will not convert into a weapon against us. So this is the timing now. And what you're doing with those events and many other events internationally is essential, because younger you are, less concerned you are about the potential threats on technology. Your consciousness get reduced. So when the new millennials or the new generation enter into the internet and buy an iPhone or get into Instagram, their consciousness is being reduced to nearly zero about the dangers on where they are entering into it. So we need to educate them. We need to explain them from where this technology came from. Where was the ground zero of this technology? Who owned that technology? How this technology has been evolving? What have been the business model for them to use this technology for free? So this education needs to be done, because these millennials in the future will become the next leaders, the next CEOs, the next ministers, the next presidents, and they will be taking decisions from their own constituencies. So it is essential that education is being done. Actually, I wrote a book, in Davos with the name Transhuman Code. This book has been published in China now. I am maybe the first author that is able to deploy this book in Chinese version, because this book says exactly what I am just explaining now, is that human needs to control back again their identity. We need to be at the center of our ecosystem, and we need to be sure that whatever happens on the internet, whatever renaissance is going to happen as we are blending AI, blockchain, IoT, artificial intelligence, all that is getting blended. And it was the case in the Renaissance, in Leonardo da Vinci time, where music, mathematics, art, culture got together, and that was a quantum leap evolution for humanity. We are in that process now, but we need to be conscious that it's a huge benefit if we do right. It's a huge risk if we do wrong.
Carlos, well, I think all what you say is very profound. It shows that, first of all, there is a before happening before the current time, and we need, to learn from the different, stages of development, and indeed, as you say, for us, for our generation, and I see books, on your back, it will be, I would say, most ridiculous, to read the book on a computer. I was one of the person to say that I will never read a book on a computer. It's like, for me, it's something, but now we see the new generation, for them it's just there, it's just natural. So I think that indeed in the process of evolution, there is in that term actually a very vast range of possibilities, which include as well big challenges, risk, and even the possibility of demotion. So in that aspect, I think that what you are, you are a representative of something which is very special, which is you have been, serving, being a public servant in an international organization. So your first passion was to serve humanity, and additionally to that, you enter the arena of the private sector because you wanted, to convey your passion at the service of humanity. So now, as we are experiencing this year, which is last year was a new set. It's a reset. It's a new year with this pandemic. But at the same time, we see that elections are like related now to data. We see that social media is capable, to blacklist a president of normally the top power in the world for whatever reasons. So the world is changing. Things and forces are moving in ways which are completely unimaginable, like years ago. So as a representative of that, balance, and with WISeKey being, like in a country which is serving, like public diplomacy through its neutrality, which is Switzerland, how can you play a role for bringing more confidence, more trust in that evolution? And what are the innovative, like aspect that you are working on at the moment that can help humanity have faith in the future, which can be, like embracing both, like humanity and technology working together in a balanced and harmonious way?
Absolutely, Jonathan. Good question. So my endeavor, whether I was in the UN and now in the private sector, although I am very much also involved with the civil society, it's always the same. Basically, I want to make sure that technology that is used, because it's an amazing gift and has been given to us, but should not be abused. Let's put the limits on it. And to be honest, when you look the way technology is developing internationally in the United States, in China, which are now the techno superpowers, Europe needs to play a role, which we are not playing yet. Europe has been slow in developing what I call the internet platforms. Internet platforms are, what is happening now with the new concept, with the name deplatforming you, which is we don't like you anymore, you say something which is not correct, we take you out of the platform and you have no voice anymore. So those platforms now are dominant in the United States and China. Those are the supra platform. It's like in a war context, if you talk about building a cyber war, that would be then the only countries that they have the aircraft carriers then where planes can land. Europe doesn't have it. We are fractionated in Europe. So my vision was, let's build the European platform. Actually, WISeKey has made acquisitions. We made 3 acquisitions. Lately, we made the acquisition of a leading AI company in Germany, which is #1 AI company in Europe. And what we are building is the European platform. We want to have all the things we need in Europe: digital identity, blockchain technology, AI, capability of developing our own semiconductors. So we have an end-to-end platform that we are not dependable of anything else anywhere else. We stay in Europe. And this is going to be the world of the future. This internet next generation is going to build into pillars where you're going to have American mighty with 10 or 20 platforms. You're going to have Chinese, which are growing as big as Americans. And then Europe needs to catch up. And that will create an equilibrium. Why? Because Europe might not be as good as Americans are in innovation. Americans are very fast in innovation. We are maybe less successful in creating ecosystems because China has 1.3 billion people, but we are very good in something they don't have, which is trust, which is the capability of injecting trust into the technology. So that means possibility of, GDPR has been a major success story. Why don't we apply GDPR everywhere? About eIDAS, which is the new European standard to run digital identities. There is absolutely no digital identity notion in the United States. And even worse in China, people don't have identities in those markets. So we need to think as an Europeans and then see, okay, what are the things we're better than anybody else? And let's build a platform on the top of that. And this is the endeavor of WISeKey. I mean, we have been pretty successful. The fight is huge, because you're fighting against a $20 trillion economy that they would like to eat you alive if they could. And our resistance to the fight is what creates the motivation for me, my staff, and everybody that cooperates, because this is not only a technology play. This is because the world needs equilibrium. If you are creating a bipolar society where only Chinese and American technology is going to be the one ruling the world, then we're going to be in trouble, because humans will need to be protected, and those models do not protect the humans. We need to build that alternative, and this is an European play.
Well, Carlos, I think this is paramount, and I hope and I wish this this conversation will be, like conveyed to some of our top government officials around the world, and especially in Europe.
Yes.
Europe has a long history. We have a lot to learn from the mistakes and the great things that were, originated in Europe, and sometimes we call that wisdom. And there is European wisdom. And when I say European wisdom, I include as well all the Mediterranean countries, because Europe was about Mediterranean at some point, and it was, as well, the mixity of the various ethnicities and cultures. It was actually the balance between Rome and Carthage. It was the equilibrium between, Greece and Alexandria. So it's like we had so much source of knowledge and so much source of wisdom that we have, to play a role into shaping the future, at least with those major stakeholders that you mentioned. Maybe to conclude, our great and passionate exchange, Carlos, you mentioned about the new generation, and I would like maybe you to share some thoughts to them. What will be your inspirational message to them? Because at the end of the day, we are already, part of almost the past. We are still there on the present, but they are the future for sure. What will be the message you would like to convey to the new generations? Because at the end of the day, this is going to be them, and we can be only, serving their future through our current contributions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have 6 kids, so I tell them all the day the same thing I cannot tell you about this approach for new generation, that although we are COVID, we are locked down at home, we cannot go out, we cannot share with friends. This is an unprecedented moment for the young generation to create value. I mean, when I created WiseKey 22 years ago, I needed something like $150 million to start the company. I need to build my data center. I have to develop my own tools. I have to develop my own crypto. And everything was development from scratch. Today, the same company, you can do it for $20,000 because you don't have to develop anything. You just go and put your data on clouds. You go and take open source software. You go and put colocation. So the cost of building a company around your innovation and your ideas has become drastically lower. And that means that rather of spending days sending CVs to trying to find a job that you're not going to find now because we are in a crisis, which is going to take at least 2-3 years before that goes back again to normal. Create companies. Innovation in Europe is very low. I mean, the number of companies that we create is insignificant in comparison to the companies that you can create in the United States and China. And it's a huge reward of that. It might be tough at the beginning, but if you have a mission statement as a young person and you want to solve one of the problems the world has, and there are so many, you can make a lot of money around that, and you can at the same time make a lot of people happy, your friends, your family, your students in the school. So I think we are in an unprecedented, I would love to be today 20 years old because there are so many opportunities. There are so many things that we can change, and there are so many tools that can help us to do it. Think about AI only. AI can reduce my staff by 90%. I can do with AI things that I need hundreds of people. So efficiency is there. We are more or less clear about what we are trying to solve, which was not the case before. We know sustainability needs to be there. We need to clean the oceans. We need to improve the distribution of food. We need to identify people and give them a birth certificate because they don't have, otherwise they are excluded from the economy. How many startups you can create around that? So I will say that rather than being pessimistic about COVID, which obviously is terrible, especially for the people that they lost family and members, it is a great opportunity to reinvent yourself, to just go and do it, thinking that it is much easier now than it was before, and there are more opportunity, and it's more money. People are always saying, when people come to me and ask me how I found my company, money follows ideas, not the other way around. Ideas don't follow money. Money follows ideas. So if you have a good idea and you know how to execute on that, you will have thousands of people that would like to invest in your project. So that's a message, very optimistic message. We are in the 4th industrial revolution. This is the time where those companies can become world leaders and one day go to the NASDAQ, as I did it here, with this NASDAQ. I mean, I was the first company in Switzerland after Logitech that went to the NASDAQ. And we did it in an amazing way, because at the beginning, everybody told me it was impossible to do so. So that's the message for young people. Never give up. Just do it.
Carlos, Moreira, thank you very much. It was, again, like always, when I share, thoughts and words with you, a sparkling of hope, sparkling of light, and a great momentum for generations to come. It will be a pleasure to continue the discussion in many other occasions. And as we are, we are, servant for building a more sustainable and inclusive future. And when I look at your team and what you have, built, I see, a lot of hope to leverage technology for the better of humanity. Thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congratulations to you as well for the event. Super.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we are
Hi, Jonathan.
Hello, David. So David Leningas, chairman of NQ Minerals, is our third speaker. Let me introduce very briefly David. David is like we say, a veteran entrepreneur. He is a believer that we can find owners, the resources that will be able, to fund the next generation of innovation that we just spoke with Carlos. At the end of the day, this is a matter of combining the right people, the right ideas, the right momentum, the right energy, and the right resources. And David, with his experience, is going to share with us how, the mineral industry, the minerals, can be a supportive force for humanity going forward. David, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, good morning, Jonathan. From something that's starting to look like a sunny London, or just out of London. Look, what I want to talk about this morning is the concept of a new super cycle for commodities, and I think it's now upon us. New innovation, a rethink of how we power the world, moving electrons and storing them, and there's going to be a lot more of those, and how we communicate and transact are having a dramatic effect on the metal supply and the demand curves in this world. Has COVID changed things? Absolutely. It's accelerated what we thought was going to happen in a couple of decades to now. Carlos has been through it, Kira's been through it. We all thought this was going to happen in 10 to 20 years' time. COVID's brought so many things forward, and all that innovation and everything that's happened around it. You've got huge amounts of fiscal pumping from governments that, they need to work out how to put, the population back to work. And they've got to rebuild their infrastructure. Not only do they need to rebuild rotting infrastructure, they need to build new infrastructure to keep up with, the new innovations and demands that's happening. And one of the core fundamental building blocks of that is the world's resources industries. Whether we like, the concept of mining or oil or gas, and I'm not going to talk about oil or gas, but I'm going to talk about, base metals and precious metals. Whether we like the concept of mining, you actually need all of those materials to go and build the tools that the Carloses of the world and a lot of the other speakers actually need to develop their skills and their craft. But because without metals, you can't build anything. And you're seeing GDP growth and all those sorts of things, consuming vast quantities of metals, and metals are becoming harder to find. And the world dynamics for metals, and particularly tech metals, are changing really fast. Plus, the industry needs to move on to the new concept of ESG, the environmental, sustainable, social responsible way, and the increasing levels of governance, required by institutional investors. And this is what's leading the new super cycle for the planet's minerals. Things like conflict metals, child labor, they're all out. The world wants good governance metals. The world now demands it. Even China, with all of the issues around cobalt and some of the rare earths, are starting to change its stance on some of these thorny issues. The world leading economies are struggling with even getting enough minerals to keep up with the changing times. Over the past century, the commodity cycles have typically been in cycles of 7 years. The last couple of cycles have been 10 to 13 years. And now we're seeing, what I think is potentially we're entering into the greatest super cycle for metals of all time. Smart tech, energy storage, of which EVs are only a very small part of it, and the need to upgrade and build new global infrastructure are rapidly changing the metals demand mix, and very quickly. Future demand for base metals will be driven by a more concerted and sustainable world through the adoption of electric devices and vehicles. The transformation will be global, and it'll be testing the limits of what the world can actually supply with respect to minerals. Base metals such as copper, zinc, nickel, lead, and aluminium are the most fundamental minerals produced for the modern economy, and are the key concepts and components that support sustained economic growth. During periods of economic expansion, now kicked along even further with the trillions of dollars being pumped in by the global governments, in response to COVID, base metals are the first materials to support, the bustling economy. Over the past 5 years or so, base metal prices have been going up, principally led by GDP growth. But, we're now seeing an even bigger demand for boutique metals, with the advent coming on of lithium-ion batteries, green energy, electric vehicles, and the trends expected to accelerate. And this slide I'm about to show you will probably surprise a lot of you as to the problems we face in keeping up with the supply to meet the world's, changing green agenda. So just bear with me for a second while I pull up this slide. Share screen. Can you see that, Jonathan?
Yes.
Jonathan, can you see it? Right.
Yes.
Now, I saw this slide from Bloomberg, at the end of last year, and these are the key metals that are being used and being sourced for the electric vehicle industry. Nickel, aluminium, phosphorus, iron, copper, graphite, lithium, cobalt, manganese. Now, that is not 14% for nickel; it's 14 times from a expected demand increase just to service the EV market over the next 10 years. Aluminium 14 times, phosphorus 13 times, iron 13 times, copper 10 times, graphite 10 times, lithium 9 times, cobalt. We're seeing a slight drop off in expected cobalt demand because Elon Musk has successfully sort of engineered cobalt out of his boutique lithium-ion batteries. So there are some very interesting dynamics that are happening in the world with respect to some of these key metals. Why do I see prices going higher? Development outside the Western world has been mainly driven, on the base metals boom. China has been the primary consumer of metals due to its rapid expansion, but we're also seeing places like India and Africa as they go up the consumption, and infrastructure build, becoming a big consumer, forgetting about the rest of the Western world that needs to organically grow. And then you've got places like America that, developing new tech, manufacturing new tech, Southeast Asia that's manufacturing for the rest of the world. They all require base metals. And then you've got the whole concept of, the whole renewable energy technology sector, which is just going nuts. The power grids around the world will adapt to include renewable sources, like wind, solar, and other technologies. I was reading something the other day that the World Energy Outlook from the IEA in 2017 expects there to be 160 gigawatts of new global power to come on just from renewables between here and 2040. And, folks, that's a lot of new electrons that need to be generated. And you need to build stuff to make those electrons and store them. And without the mining sector, you don't have it. And mineral resources are becoming scarcer and scarcer, and big discoveries are becoming harder to find. And then you've got the whole concept of, which countries are conducive to mining, which countries are making mining more difficult. So renewables will capture 2/3 of global investment in power plants by 2040. And renewables rely heavy on base metals for their construction and would not exist without them. And then you look at the whole concept of electric vehicles. Gasoline cars will, and for the petrol heads amongst us, become dinosaurs and fossils. EV production alone is expected to increase from around 2 million units this year to 30 million units by 2030. That's only 10 years away. According to the International Energy Agency, the number of EVs on the road around the world will be around about 120 million cars by 2030. I mean, that's phenomenal. And that's a huge mind shift change. And these people are also saying that by 2030, China alone will account for about 39 to 40% of the global EV market. So where's the problem, right? So we've got dwindling supply, and that is a real problem. The whole concept of mining and producing commodities for consumption around the world is, can you keep replacing old deposits with new ones? And things are becoming very, very tight. Tighter environmental constraints, sanctions against commodity producers, and rising costs. If new supply doesn't come into the market, this will also drive prices for base metals higher. And where's the new supply coming from? There's only one new source to replenish supply and fulfill the rampant need for future demand, and that's from mining. New mines need to be discovered, developed, and come online to meet demand. And new mines are getting harder to find, as I said. In the meantime, those that invest in base metal commodities and mining could see scarcity drive prices up as the economy moves towards an electric future on a more populated planet. An extended base metal boom may well be very much on the horizon. And in addition to bringing in new mines, there's another thing that I'm particularly passionate about, and that's bringing the billions of tons of old mine tailings, which are now proving to be economic because the price has gone up, back into production. Tailings are a legacy of the global mining industry. They're the materials left over, from the process of separating the valuable fractions of ore, and tailings are the waste, but those tailings still contain unrecovered metals that they were originally put on for. And my research at the moment shows that there's about 14 billion tons of tailings produced globally every year across all metals, 3.2 billion tons alone just from the copper industry. Many of these leave long-term environmental legacies for the local communities and massive contingent financial liabilities for governments. These old tailings are fast becoming economic due to the pendulum shift due to the rising commodity prices. You've got lower operating costs, you've got rising commodity prices, you've got governments that want residual tailings dams cleaned up because of the long-term environmental impact of these vast tailings deposits that sort of sit out of the ground. And we've got a real issue. At the moment, just looking around at the internet, there's about 18,000 big tailings dams in the world today, of which about 3,500 of these structures are still active, in participating mines. And many of these old dams are turning into big environmental disasters waiting to happen. I mean, if we look back at Brazil last year and the year before, with some of the big tailings dams that have collapsed and the environmental damage that they've done, I think they've created a real look-see around the world, particularly from bureaucrats and regulators, in how safe are the tailings dams that sit in my country, and what's the population that lives downstream from some of these populations, and how exposed are they to them. And one of the things that I'm working on, I've been involved with NQ Minerals for about a year, is the concept of retreating what could be an environmental disaster waiting to happen in decades' time, the famous Helia mine tailings in pristine Tasmania in Australia. Helia was one of the richest lead zinc mines in the world 30 years ago. 25% of the rock that these people mined was literally lead and zinc metal. And over the 12 to 15 years of processing at Helia, there's a 12 million ton tailings dam sitting in the pristine countryside of Tasmania feeding into the Kew River. Now, potentially the Tasmanian government had a huge contingent financial liability from the people who left these tailings dams there. And what happens to that liability? Does it sit on the government balance sheet? What happens when the acid mine drainage starts running into the Kew River and starts affecting the flora and the fauna? So 2018, NQ spent a lot of money, looked at the concept of the economics of Helier, because still today that the tailings contain about 6%, combined lead zinc, and was there an economic and an environmental case to reprocess the tailings and use the profit from those operations to prepare the tailings to last for millennia. And that's what the NQ operation is all about. And it's been very successful. We produce a lot of lead zinc concentrates. It goes off to the world smelters. We're cleaning up the environmental footprint. We're putting the reprocessed tailings back into tailings dams that have been engineered to last lifetimes, not for 20, 30 years like they were originally designed, because engineering practices and factors of safety have changed quite significantly. And so that's been a great success for NQ Minerals. It's got a 10-year mine life. It creates revenue to look at other environmental cleanup projects. NQ's just acquired the Beaconsfield gold mine, which is just down the road. I mean, that's been an environmental disaster waiting to happen. For 150 years of mining, there's been mine discharge running down over the countryside that's full of arsenic and contaminated iron particles. So, NQ's next project is to use the economics of the fact that the gold price has now gone up to first rehabilitate the environmental impacts of 150 years of legacy mining issues, and with the profit from that, put Beaconsfield back into operation. So I see there's some really good opportunities sitting in the world for institutional players and governments to come in and back the whole concept of meeting the supply-demand curve for base metals and precious metals by going back into a resource that's already mined. And the higher the price, the more economic these things become. So, it's a project that this whole concept of mining and base metal supply, we're going to be in short supply. The world is changing so quickly and we need a lot of it. So that's my general introduction, Jonathan, into why I think we're seeing a world super cycle coming for commodities. So over to you.
Well, David, I think it's very, very, first of all, eyes opening. It's important when we discuss, earlier, it's people need to understand that we are, and it's very trendy to speak about innovation and the new, cycle of innovation and new technologies. But the reality is it has to be, backed by people and execution with materials. And so this is very key, that governments and multi-stakeholders, investors can understand that we have indeed to do it in a more responsible way. We have, as well as you stress, to include the aspect of waste and rehabilitation into the process. And I think on that regards, what you are, leading with NQ Minerals, I think it's very, very, breakthrough leading, and it's opening a new chapter for indeed the mining industry to be actually serving local communities, environment, and at the same time being able, to bring its contribution for the new technologies that are going to shape the world of tomorrow. So David, maybe in less than a minute, because we have to jump. Yes.
Yeah. Carry on.
Maybe just in less than a minute, because we have to jump into the next.
No, you.
I would like to get from you a message for the citizen of the world and a new generation, especially the one that will be willing to become maybe entrepreneurs like you are. What will be your message for them based on your experience?
Well, when you get a little bit older, like a lot of us on this conference, you sort of become a little bit more philosophical. We've all got young children, and they sit there in a very strange world, not knowing what faces them tomorrow. I think it's a fantastic world that we live in, and I follow what Carlos was saying. What an exciting world we live in. Okay, do we all want to get a jab in the arm? Do we all like the fact that we can't go on holidays that much? But we're in a very dynamic world, and I think the leaders of the world try their hardest, and everyone sits there poking fingers at them, say, you haven't done that right, you haven't done this right. We're all working together to try and achieve the common goal of building a better society. And we're seeing a whole lot of innovation changes. We're seeing tech changes. We're seeing government changes. We're seeing, the building blocks of the world change, and everybody's got to play their little part. So, there's no heroes here. We all just try and do our own thing, and we've all got to contribute. And I think, at the end of the day, we'll all end up in a much better place. It's just, bunker down, rethink how we do things, and get on with life.
David, it was a pleasure to welcome you in the 10th edition of SIGEF, and we will have to continue this chat in the next one that will be happening in March. David Leningnas, who is definitely, an entrepreneur with great experience, but as well with an innovative mind to leverage entrepreneurship for bringing a very old industry into, the generation of tomorrow. So, David Leningnas, thank you very much, Chairman of NQ Minerals, and we speak soon.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Ciao.